Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon po at kumusta po kayo? No, I hope that we're all still safe and healthy and hopeful during this time of pandemic and ready for this afternoon's National Situationer Update. My name is Marshall Murillo, Deputy Director of Center for Local Governance and also Faculty of Social Sciences Department here in Ateneo University. And I will be your MC and moderator for this afternoon's webinar. So to begin and formally start our program, may I now acknowledge our university choir and to their program director, Mr. Joseph Fabriano, to open or to start our invocation this afternoon.
Take, Lord, receive all my liberty, my memory, understanding, my entire will. Give me only your love and your grace, that's enough for me. Your love and your grace are enough for me. Take, Lord, receive all I haven't possessed. You have given all to me, now I return it. Give me only your love and your grace, that's enough for me. Your love and your grace are enough for me.
Thank you, University Choir, and to their program director, Mr. Joseph Fabriano. The Ateneo University Office of Student Affairs, or OSA, is proud to present to you the first webinar organized by the office for the second semester of school year 2021 and 2022. This webinar is being viewed not only by Ateneans but also by students and professionals from other schools, thanks to the cooperation of the Philippine Association of Practitioners of Student Affairs and Services, PAPSAS Region 5. A quick reminder to our dear Zoom participants to keep your microphone on mute to avoid interrupting our speakers. You are all, however, invited to share your comments, your insights about the topic or the discussion through our Zoom chat box. Now, to give you, our dear participants, a brief background on our online activity this afternoon, the National Situationer Update, or commonly known as NaSit, is an annual offering of the Ateneo University Office of Student Affairs that aims at raising awareness and understanding of students in social, political, and economic and other specific issues affecting the youth and the state of the nation, and also motivating us, students, youth, to critically and intelligently think and react to these issues. Since 2008, our major NaSit per semester or year has been sustained, namely the live telecast of the President's State of the Nation Address and Alternative SONA in the first semester and the NaSit in the second semester. In school year 2010 to 2011, the National Situationer was reorganized under the Ateneo Leadership Development Program or ALDP, the overarching program of OSA for Ateneo Dinague student leaders and organization, which aims at developing 3 areas of growth in leaders, namely self-awareness, competence, and social responsibility. The NaSit was placed under the social responsibility of growth here in Ateneo Dinague University. This is the 14th year that the OSA has sustained the implementation of National Situationer or NaSit. In previous NaSits, OSA has had the honor to invite speakers in the legs of the government officials such as the current Vice President Leni Robredo and former Senator Bam Aquino, news anchor Ed Lingao, and award-winning journalist Howie Severino, and political analyst Randy David to discuss the country's predominant issues in the country's history. For this year's NaSit, the speakers will be discussing the prevalent socio-economic and political issues in relation to the upcoming national and local elections, as well as the government response or responses to the ongoing pandemic. Let me now share with you the schedule of today's webinar. As usual, there will be 2 parts. The first part is the presentation of our 2 speakers. Yes, we have 2 speakers this afternoon. While the second part is the open forum. So if you have any questions or comments to the presentation of our speakers, kindly post them on the Zoom chat box. Or for those viewing via the Adnu OSA YouTube channel, you may indicate them in the live chat there. Please state your name, the school or organization you represent, and your brief question or comments. Later, during the open forum, we will try our best to address them through our respective speakers and even reactors. So also, the e-certificates will be given to those who pre-registered and who will accomplish the evaluation form. And we will provide a link later at the end of this online event. We hope that we will gain new knowledge or useful learning at the end of this session. All right, let's go now to the main business. Let me now introduce to you guys our first speaker. Our first speaker was also our former speaker back in 2019, no? Taon kung saan hindi pa natin lahat na-i-imagine na pwedeng ganapin ang National Situationer at ibang activities online. No? Our first speaker, Dean Ronald U. Mendoza, is a governance and institutional reform specialist with over 25 years of experience in development policy and public administration reforms. Presently, he is the Dean and Professor of Economics at the Ateneo School of Government. From 2011 to 2015, he was an Associate Professor of Economics at the Asian Institute of Management or AIM and the Executive Director of the AIM Rizalino S. Navarro Policy Center for Competitiveness. Prior to that, he was a senior economist with the United Nations in New York. His research background includes work with UNICEF, UNDP, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, the Economist Intelligence Unit or EIU, and several Manila-based non-governmental organizations. Dean Mendoza obtained his bachelor's degree in economics honors program from the Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines, his master's in public administration and international development from the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, and his MA and PhD in economics from Fordham University. He is a recipient of various awards, including the 2012 National Academy of Science and Technology's 10 Outstanding Young Scientists in the Philippines in economics. The World Economics Forum Young Leader or Young Global Leaders in 2013, and DevEx 40 Under 40 Development Leader in 2013. In early 2021, the UN Economic and Social Council approved Dr. Mendoza's appointment to serve with the 24-person UN Committee of the Experts on Public Administration, or CEPA, from 2021 to 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all give Dean Ronald Mendoza a virtual round of applause.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Professor Murillo. I actually pre-recorded my presentation, and so I was invited by Gerald to just say hello briefly, and obviously show myself before the presentation is shared with everyone. But I very much welcome the Q&A afterwards, so I hope you find it useful. Thank you.
Maraming salamat din sa pagpapaunlak, Dean Ron. Thank you. And we will now play the presentation.
Thank you for the chance to share some of our research today on the reforms in the new administration. This is the COVID-19 pandemic management challenges of the Philippines, and the second part, which now focuses on the political landscape in the run-up to the May 2022 elections and the emerging reform prospects for the new administration. So I would just like to begin first by noting that one of the main problems, challenges faced by the Philippines, obviously preceded COVID-19, is lingering and deep inequality. It is a challenge that preceded COVID-19 and possibly has been exacerbated deeply by the COVID-19 pandemic because of the challenges we faced in managing COVID-19, as well as the natural tendency of inequality to deepen itself because of the imbalanced nature of responses to the crisis. So I want to first show you the poverty reduction trajectory of the country. You will see in 2015 and 2018, we had a trend already of reducing poverty, possibly on the back of fast economic growth, as well as the relative success of the reforms coming in from the last administration and into the first part of this Duterte administration. There was a lot of bullishness on the Philippines, as it actually was considered one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, if not the world. And the statistic between 2015 and 2018 is a reduction of poverty by roughly about 4.1 million Filipinos. Unfortunately, in the latest update on the poverty statistics, the Philippine Statistics Authority revealed that there has been an increase in the poverty rate, as well as an increase in the headcount poverty estimated by about 3.6 million Filipinos. So this actually, when juxtaposed against each other, shows a near wiping out of the poverty reduction gains between 2015 and 2021, unfortunately. And this is not entirely surprising because of the major challenges the Philippines faced in its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Take note also that this estimate relates to the early part of 2021. This does not even consider the deep impact, social and economic impact of the Delta variant, which affected the country in 2021 towards the later part of 2021. And of course, it doesn't even cover the period of the Omicron variant, which affected the country in early 2022. If you look at a longer time series, there is a data set provided by Social Weather Station, which actually shows the self-rated poverty statistic, which spans from May 1986 to almost the present. And if you look at this, there has been a general trend and tendency for self-rated poverty to decline over time from its peak in the Marcos years, in the later part of the Marcos administration, when self-rated poverty was almost 70%. This started to decline, and this is most likely part of the improving economic prospects and the reforms successfully pushed over different administrations. And this decline appears to have been quite observable during the Macapagal-Arroyo and the Aquino administration, but has been a little bit stagnant during the Duterte administration because most likely of the COVID-19 pandemic and the mishandling of this particular crisis. So we see an increase in self-rated poverty in the latest statistics reported by SWS. And if you look at self-rated hunger, there has also been a general decline between the Macapagal-Arroyo and Aquino administrations going into the Duterte administration, the early part, but this has spiked during the pandemic, and it has been relaxing recently, but of course the spike reveals potential social and economic costs during this period when many families have been affected by hunger during the pandemic. So I focus now on the main issue, which is inequality. And this is really what I would like to talk about in my presentation. Inequality in the Philippines is one of the lingering challenges, and as I will try to explain, it is actually reflected in various lingering challenges for the country that sort of feed on each other. So essentially, it's a self-reinforcing equilibrium. Begins with weak upward mobility due to the inequality in opportunities, notably among our younger population in terms of looking for jobs, as well as the disaster-prone nature of the Philippines. As I mentioned earlier, when there is a disaster, the weakest and the most vulnerable are typically the least able to adapt to the impact of a disaster. And of course, we've seen earthquakes, we've seen floods, we've seen typhoons, and we've seen droughts. But now that we've seen a pandemic, it is becoming clear, painfully clear, that the weakest and most vulnerable and the poorest are actually least able to adapt. They are least connected in terms of the internet and online adaptation methods, such as for their children to go online and attend school. They don't usually have this option. If they do, the quality is not that great. They also have poor work contracts and poor insurance mechanisms. They typically are involved in the informal economy, where risk management and insurance mechanisms are not that strong. And you also see them most affected because of the lockdowns, because of the mobility restrictions, because many of the people in the poor and low income segment are engaged in daily work, where it is a no work, no pay situation. So under these conditions, it's easy to imagine that they are the most negatively affected if we are unable to manage the pandemic well. The second point is political concentration, and I'd like to shed some light on this as well based on our research. This is reflected mainly in the Philippines in the form of political dynasties. And we've done a lot of research on how political dynasties weaken political competition, they weaken checks and balances, and they often lead to governance challenges, which in turn leads to underdevelopment and poor poverty reduction and poor inequality reduction. The third aspect of inequality in the country has to do with economic concentration, which relates to the rent-seeking and weak competition, which still characterizes many parts of the Philippine economy. It also motivates many of the political actors to seek political power, to seek the levers of political power, so that they can control the main levers for crony capitalism. And this is really part of the motivation for many of them to spend so much money in order to take control of that power, because they are able to take control of vast sectors in the economy, which then enables them to control that rent, which then is essentially the return on their investment, and is typically much larger than any amount they will spend to get elected. That is the corrupt relationship between the economic inequality side and the political inequality side. So I'll just point out here that inequality appears to be self-reinforcing in the Philippines. You know, an unequal population often exacerbates the unequal political situation, which then exacerbates or at least prevents deep reforms in the unequal economic situation. And this is, you know, the challenge going into this election, because it's again reflecting many of these malfunctions in our democracy, in our political system. And what I would like to talk about is some of the you know, facets of this malfunction, as well as a potential reform agenda in order to unwind out of this inequality trap. So here is the picture of inequality. This is the essentially the map of income across different income segments in the Philippines. It's a little bit dated, and we're updating this particular income pyramid. But for the most part, the pyramid, even with the update, is going to look, you know, for the most part the same. So if you'll bear with me, I'll just show you this 2012 version. There is a group of poor households at the bottom of the pyramid, amounting to about 4.2 million households. There's a lower income class of about 7.1 million households. Then there is the middle income class of about 9.8 million households. And then there is a very top income class of about only 320,000 households. And you can see from the income levels across the different you know, segments that this is a very stratified society in terms of income. And upward mobility, moving from poor and low income upwards to middle income or even upper income, is typically very difficult in the Philippines for many reasons, including the inadequate investments in human capital. As I mentioned earlier, the recurrent shocks that may actually push you back into poverty and low income status, the inadequate risk management and insurance mechanisms that we have, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, in 2012, and I expect in 2022, it is not that vastly different, about half of the Philippines is classified as lower income or poor, and is actually earning you know, an amount that is actually very, very low compared to the ambition of the average Filipino. So the challenge, of course, is a very much a long-standing one and lingering one. The Gini coefficient, which is essentially a measure of income inequality used by economists. If we track this over time from the 1950s to the 2010s, essentially this is the latest estimate, we can see that the Gini has barely changed over time and is hovering at just slightly under 50, slightly over 40. And there has not been a dramatic reduction in inequality in the Philippines, despite the growth, the recent growth in the Philippine economy. And we even see a very, very deep inequality in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And this has not actually been reduced dramatically. It was only reduced marginally during the post-EDSA period. So it is very much a challenge that you know, continues to affect the Philippines, both in the economy as well as in the political system. And here I will argue that the political system actually reflects the inequality in the economy. If you have very, very wealthy individuals and very, very poor individuals in the Philippine economy, you also have very, very politically connected individuals, and then very much disempowered individuals at the bottom of the political pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid are essentially the political clans. These are the rather large and long-lived political families that have come to dominate Philippine politics over a long period of time. There are two main types I wanted to talk to you about. The first is the thin dynasty. Payat, nagsusunod-sunod lang sila. And then there's the fat dynasty, yung mataba at nagsasabay-sabay po sila. So the difference between the two is actually night and day. The thin dynasty, one way of describing them is that they still have delicadeza. They do not want to look as though they are, concentrating power only amongst themselves. So even though they will typically hold on to a congressional seat or a gubernatorial seat or a mayoral seat in the countryside and pass it on to, to family members over time, they won't necessarily field many family members altogether because it looks bad. No, the fat dynasties, however, are not encumbered by this kind of norm, and they have seen fit to field many family members and simultaneously occupy power with those family members, and the result often is a debilitating effect on checks and balances and a debilitating effect on political competition. They are able to take advantage of the levers of power and incumbency advantages and make it very, very difficult for upstarts, for alternative candidates to emerge. And that is essentially the anti-competitive effect of fat political dynasties, particularly in those regions, in those provinces where they have come to dominate almost all the top positions. So this is just the data set on political inequality in the country, looking at one indicator, which is political dynasties. If you look at political dynasties as the concentration of political power, then over time, it appears that the concentration of political power is getting worse and worse. If you look at governors, 80% of governors, 67% of congressmen, and 53% of mayors belong to fat dynasties, meaning those political clans with 2 family members and above in elected office. So this has been our working definition for fat dynasties. And if you look at the transition over time from 2004 to nearly the present, or at least certainly the last elections, you will see that fat dynasties have been growing in terms of the number of positions that they are now encumbering, and they have been so the tendency has been to actually edge out thin dynasties and non-dynasties. So I just want to give you a concrete example of one family in Sulu province. We have all of these for all of the provinces. So for those of you who are interested, feel free to write to us in Ateneo Policy Center, and we can send you, especially for the young people who want to check what their province looks like, we can send you the leadership profile for every Philippine province between 2004 and 2019. And you will see here, I only set it for 2016, but if you will see here that the TANs in Sulu started with 3 family members in office in 2004, and they have since expanded to 7 family members in 2016. And you will see that the poverty incidence during that time, when they were expanding their essentially hold on political power in the province, poverty in Sulu has been increasing from 40% to upwards of almost 55% by 2015. And of course, the challenge is that there are even governance and impunity challenges linked to political power in Sulu. This is what they look like in 2019. Actually, they added 1 more family member in power. And as you can see, governor, vice governor, several mayors, 1 mayor and several vice mayors, 1 congressman, and 1 councillor or several councillors in the family. Here's another example, which is Masbate. Masbate is an example of a violent political competition taking place in that province. Between 1989 and 2005, 4 congressmen in Masbate have been assassinated in very, very intense political competition, which does not translate into better policies nor innovative public management. It translates into violence. And this is the unfortunate side of competition among political dynasties, where there is intense competition, but not the kind of competition that brings about better public services or better governance. So meanwhile, while 4 congressmen died in Masbate, 1 in 2 Filipinos in Masbate during that entire period lived below the poverty line. And essentially governance in that province and development in that province has proven to be quite elusive despite the intense competition among the dynasties there. So here's what Masbate looks like in the 2019 elections, and you will see that there are 2 major political clans in Masbate, the 𝒂𝒊, who have been dominating Masbate, and of course the 𝑍𝒊𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍, who have been trying to compete with them. And it shows that the dynasties are competing amongst themselves, and this is not necessarily producing better governance or alternative leadership for the province of Masbate, which, by the way, is one of the poorest provinces in the country. So we're looking at the May 2022 elections, and what are the prospects for reforming all of these different facets of inequality and the different development challenges faced by the country. Let's quickly review what the landscape looks like. This is Isko Moreno, who is the mayor of Manila, and his top 3 policy reform priorities are the pandemic response, job creation, and the creation of social infrastructure for greater inclusiveness and inequality reduction. Here is Bongbong Marcos, who is an ex-senator, and his priorities include job creation, agriculture, and tourism. Here is Vice President Leni Robredo, and her priorities are job creation, equitable healthcare, and improving and making more competitive the education system. Here is Senator Panfilo Lacson, and his priorities are budget reforms as it relates to anti-corruption, digitalization of government systems, and of course, his broader campaign against corruption in government. And then this is 𝑘𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍, who is essentially a very much an alternative leader compared to some of the other leaders on offer. And he's a labor leader, and he's a welcome addition to the options, if you ask me. And his policy reform priorities include labor first, a possible wealth tax, and to nationalize public spaces and services. So these are all fairly controversial reforms, and certainly depart from some of the reforms that we have been pursuing already as a country. And finally, there is Senator Manny Pacquiao, who is also aspiring for the presidency, and his policy reform, his top reform priorities include economic growth, job creation, and free housing and hospital care. So with these options, you can see that there's a good deal of overlap actually among the top priorities of many of these leaders, and where the rubber hits the road essentially is how they will actually manage to push for these types of major reforms and major social and economic outcomes. And our review of essentially the determined priorities, let's say by business, reveals that it also coheres with some of what has been prioritized by the candidates. So here is the top 5 risks faced by the Philippines based on an expert opinion survey, an executive opinion survey conducted between May and September 2021 by the World Economic Forum as it relates to the Philippines. And you will see here prolonged economic stagnation. So the job creation element actually links to this. The digital inequality, which is the unequalizing effect of the pandemic as it relates to unequal abilities to adapt to the online connectivity aspect of pandemic response. The third is extreme weather events, so that's climate change. The fourth is employment and livelihood crisis, so as we noted, job creation. And finally, the failure of infrastructure and the need for effective infrastructure. So it does appear to cohere with what executives and experts also note as what the country needs. And if you look at surveys of what people, Filipinos, generally try to prioritize in terms of key issues or what they say are their priorities, there is also a strong coherence with what many of the presidentiables have noted. The first, this is a survey conducted by Boses Filipinas. It's called the Vine Survey, and it is a survey involving a novel approach to conducting online surveys in the Philippines. This is a survey of about 1,500 individuals, as I understand it, 1,500 respondents from a sample frame of over 300,000 identified as representative of the entire nation. Based on this survey, we find that some of the top priorities identified by Filipinos include fighting graft and corruption, 60%, creating more jobs, which is the job creation point earlier, 50%, controlling the spread of COVID-19, essentially enhancing pandemic management, 48%, and social services, reducing poverty, 45%, and improving and increasing the pay of workers, 44%. The elimination of the sale and use of illegal drugs, so countering illegal drugs, still garners about 37% of the responses, which is certainly cohering with some of the priorities of this present administration. But clearly, if you look at this prioritization, the main priority has to do with fighting corruption, creating jobs, and taking control of COVID-19 and making sure we are able to mount an aggressive and robust recovery from this crisis. So even as we know that all of these policy issues are being espoused by candidates and being talked about by those Filipinos who are captured in surveys, or interviewed in surveys, we do know that candidates' personalities are very, very much a factor, not necessarily just the policy issues that they are espousing or supporting, but Philippine politics is generally deemed by many analysts and observers as very personalistic in nature. And it has to do partly with the weak political party system, the lack of clarity in the policy platforms that some of the candidates are advancing, and essentially the need for greater maturity among the voters to understand how the different policy options actually affect their daily lives. So if you look at personal qualities, which is also part of the Boses Filipinas survey, and this appears to factor very, very heavily in the choices of many voters. The first priority is to provide strong leadership, which is not entirely surprising because this is part of the explanation for why some candidates are ranking very, very strongly, while the present administration, which was associated with strong leadership as well, has continued to reflect high support from in surveys. The second is honesty, which then relates to the anti-corruption preference. The third is intelligence, which has to do with merit and with capability to deliver. The fourth has to do with getting things done, again with capability to deliver. And finally, morally upright, which may have to do again with going up against corruption and not being corrupt themselves. And after that is being compassionate. So essentially reflecting that kind of leadership that cares about social outcomes, cares about poverty reduction, inequality reduction, and the plight of those most left behind. Now, if you look at these types of priorities, we have to consider that these are also shaping the preferences of voters, and not necessarily all voters are choosing just based on policy issues. It appears that is to be expected because the policy issues themselves are not really deeply talked about nor debated, at least not yet. And so this is one of the areas where we hope there will be some dramatic improvement in the next few weeks, if not months, in the run-up to the elections. The clearer policy platforms and the policy issues to be debated. So before I end, I just wanted to describe, well, if you're looking at real reform prospects in the next administration and things that may actually begin to change things and break us away from the inequality trap we're in right now, we first need to diagnose what actually keeps us in that trap, and then we can identify what types of reforms can actually help us break out of it. And certainly, the political landscape we're facing right now shows us many of the malfunctions of the present situation, including the emergence of very fat political dynasties. So let's begin with the inequality trap and what it looks like. What is the diagnosis for the Philippines? We begin with elections dominated by political dynasties and weak political parties. As I mentioned, this then relates to unclear policy platforms, politics of personality, and very much a political landscape that is dominated by political clans that have the power of incumbency, the power of resources, often corrupt resources that they were able to collect during their incumbency and use in favor of their re-election. If you have that situation and the elections are dominated by political clans, political dynasties, on average, what you will have is a weak institutional reform agenda because you did not really discuss in depth all of the reforms and all of the policy issues that we needed to really base our choices on. And so that is part of the lingering challenge of our election process in the country. If you have a weak institutional reform agenda, it contributes to a continued state capture and rent seeking. And we've seen this in almost every administration, including the Marcos dictatorship, but also in the so-called reformist administrations that followed, that not all of the challenges are immediately fixed. Not all of the challenges are immediately reformed, and you will see examples of crony capitalism and state capture and corruption, persisting in the government bureaucracy, and it's very, very difficult to root it out and stop it if you don't have an overarching reform agenda that looks at how that can be changed, how that can be reformed over a longer period of time, certainly much longer than a 6-year period that a president has. So policy continuity also in that reform process is very, very important. This then leads to corruption, finance, and personality politics. So essentially the kickbacks, the corrupted resources out of the public fisc, which then ends up in the hands of very corrupt political leaders who also tend to want to concentrate political power among themselves, among their political clans, which then is what is helping perpetuate them when they run for office again in elections. So when you have corruption, finance, and personality politics, it's unlikely that they will be reducing poverty very, very aggressively, and you will still have a very vulnerable middle class. They would not necessarily focus on these deep reforms to one extent because they are the beneficiaries of the status quo. They're actually thriving in the present system, which is highly unequal. So in a way, it is actually surprising if they actually passed laws and passed reforms that would debilitate their advantage in such an unequal situation. So if that's the case, then what you have, again, going into an election cycle is the same types of imbalances and the same inequality that benefits them and does not necessarily empower the vast majority of Filipinos. So this is essentially the inequality trap that is going in cycles. And as you can see or easily imagine, this is something that can be self-reinforcing over time. So the three main challenges, reflections of inequality in the country: political concentration of power, economic concentration, and inequality in opportunities. These are the things we need to change. Let me end with a final thought on a reform agenda, an emerging reform agenda for the next administration, which may touch upon some of the reforms that the presidentiables that I talked about earlier. It's very much related to some of their aspirations as well. One is the inclusive society, which again, if you're thinking about inequality, in a nutshell, one way to debilitate inequality is through inclusion. And an inclusive society, an inclusive democracy, and an inclusive economy are actually nice, very sharp ways to juxtapose the reform agenda against three baskets of reforms. The inclusive society has to do with social protection and strengthening upward social mobility, a society that is not necessarily characterized by very massive divides among the people. An inclusive democracy, which again gives power to the people and does not necessarily allow for the over-concentration of political power in just a few political families, political clans. So regulating dynasties is one reform, and so is strengthening political parties so that the alternative leaders will come from these stronger political parties. And finally, in terms of the inclusive economy, improving competition and leveling the playing field, these are some of the reforms that may end the crony capitalism and the state capture tendencies that many of the political leaders still engage in. And they can only engage in it to the extent that the state still controls very much some of these sectors in the economy. Increased competition and increased openness in these sectors, tempers that tendency for rent-seeking and crony capitalism. So it is also part of the reform agenda that may bring about greater inclusion and certainly greater foreign investments, greater innovation, and even stronger job generation for the country. Let me end here and thank you for bearing with me on such an extensive presentation. I would very much welcome our discussion after this.
All right. And also thank you to Dean Mendoza for that very insightful and informative presentation. Actually, I took a lot of notes now from your presentation. I particularly like how you highlight the increasing political concentrations and how these do not really translate into economic developments. And of course, how socio-economic and political reforms can nevertheless have profound implications for both development and democracy. But again, to our dear participants, I know you guys have questions, comments, or insights you want to share, but let's reserve that later. But we encourage you to type down those questions in our Zoom chat box. So first, let's acknowledge also our second speaker. So after our second speaker, we can now open the floor for discussion and reactions. So let me now introduce our second speaker for this afternoon. Actually, he is a friend. Mr. Roland John G. Bulao is an assistant professor and director of Partido's Institute of Economics, College of Business and Management in Partido State University here in Camarines Sur. In 2019, he was elected the founding president of the Council of Program Heads and Educators of Economics in Bicol region. He is also the president and CEO of 𝙍𝙤𝙡𝙖 Center Incorporated, a leading tutorial training and review center in Naga City. Mr. Bulao was a former chairperson and assistant professor of the Social Sciences Department, College of Humanities and Social Sciences of Ateneo de Naga University. He was also a lecturer in Adnu Graduate School and a research associate in the Ateneo Social Science Research Center in the same university. Mr. Bulao also handled classes in the UP School of Economics. Mr. Bulao has been involved in COVID-19 value chain analysis and disaster risk reduction in management research projects 𝑼𝒑𝒅𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 or Partido State University. In response to the needs of the time, he led the 𝑺𝒊𝒕𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 regional training on module content development for business and economics education in 2020 to 2021. While he was still in Adnu, he was part of studies on pili nut and resin industry, Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program or for peace and migration and development. He also acted as consultant and coach for formulation of municipal tourism development plans of Metro Naga Development Council member LGUs. Mr. Bulao obtained his degrees in BS Business Economics and MA Economics from the School of Economics of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He is a candidate for the degree of Doctor of Business Administration in Ateneo de Naga University. He placed fourth in the April 2016 Career Service exam. Above all, he is a loving husband and a father to his family. Thus, he dreams and works for a better life for them and thousands of other Filipinos' families. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all virtually welcome our second speaker, Mr. Roland John G. Bulao. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, 𝑺𝒊𝒕𝒂𝒂𝒍. Daghang salamat, Dr. Marshall. Allow me to first, it's always a pleasure to talk in front of the Ateneo de Naga community. Special greetings to my former home in the Social Sciences Department and the ASSRC. So allow me to share my presentation for our local situation. So this is titled 𝑖NI and Camarines Sur because this is our current situation in terms of the socio-political and economic picture. So just marahay na hapon po sa Gabos. So as an outline, I will talk basically about the economic picture and the socio-political pictures of the province. So under economic picture, we'll look at the regional economic activity. I'll explain why we don't have a provincial economic activity later. Then the human development, population, labor employment, poverty, pandemic response, and vaccination. Under the political landscape, we have, of course, VP Leny's candidacy and his fight to win the presidency and its impact on the local politics and some local issues that matter to our voters in Camarines Sur. Okay, let's start. Before we continue, so here's a quotation or a quotation from the president of Taiwan. She said, "Democracy is not just an election; it is our daily life," and that's also the reason why the NaSit has been a very important event in the history of Ateneo de Naga because it updates the entire community, regardless of whether there's an election or not. Okay, actually, the way we do things in our life is very much part of democracy. Now, for the economic picture, I chose this as our backdrop, and you can actually reflect on the meaning of this image. Why is this a perfect image to describe the economic picture of Camarines Sur and probably the Philippines as well? By the way, this is a very famous tourist destination. It has become a tourist destination in Barangay Tagas in Partido, Barangay Tagas, San Jose, in the 4th district of Camarines Sur. It's not yet finished. Okay, that's why you don't see any cars here. Only people taking pictures of this infrastructure project. Again, very much a representation of our current economic situation. So let's start with regional economic activity. Again, we don't have provincial product account yet in Camarines Sur. It was only last year that the Philippine Statistics Authority introduced the PPA or the provincial product account, wherein they can already measure the provincial level GDP. Right now, the Bicol region only has gross regional domestic product or GRDP. We don't have provincial product accounts yet for the provinces of the Bicol region. Last year, PSA only conducted PPA activities in the regions of Mimaropa, Central Visayas, and then Northern Mindanao. And then they will be adding additional, of course, new provinces this year. But Bicol provinces are not yet part of that. So for that reason, we'll only focus first on the regional economic activity. So this was our performance of Bicol. Here's Bicol. Let's change this into laser pointer. There. Bicol grew the fastest in 2019. This is before the pandemic. Okay. Its growth was 7.4% versus the Philippine GDP growth of only 6%. Now after a year, it was reversed again because of the pandemic. The Philippines registered a negative 9.6% growth in GDP, while Bicol registered 8.4% drop in its GRDP. So the main sectors affected are actually almost all industries were affected by the decline. And the worst one was accommodation and food service activities. Resorts, hotels, restaurants, they were the worst hit. And then, of course, the other services. Only information, communications technology, financial insurance activities, and public administration, etc., registered positive growths during that period. Then in household final expenditure, among the items and expenditure items in our GDP, the capital formation, meaning the activities of businesses, dropped the most, and then only government expenditure increased. Of course, because of the BBB projects, the ayuda, and other of course, the pandemic response of our government. That's why it was the only component of GDP that registered a positive growth during that period in 2020. Okay. Now, for our comparison, Region 5 registered a 9% increase in government final consumption expenditure in 2020. This is a little lower than the national growth rate of 10.5%. Nevertheless, in all regions, the government spending really picked up. This is very Keynesian. Actually, in times of crisis, the government should increase its spending, okay, to create some multiplier effect, okay, to, of course, pump prime the economy. Okay, then this is the real per capita GDP by region. What's real GDP per capita? This is the GDP divided by the population. So it's a rough estimate of how much an individual earns for a particular year. A rough estimate only. It's an imperfect measure of the well-being of people. So Filipinos in general experience a 10.8% decline in their well-being. Okay, and then Bicolanos experienced a little less at negative 9.3% only, almost the same as the national decline. Okay. Now, let's discuss human development. Basically, Human Development Index is a tool by the UNDP, the UN Development Program, to capture literacy, the income as measured by GNI, and of course, life expectancy to somehow balance the picture. This does not only focus on the income. So among the top areas by HDI, you cannot find any Bicol province here. Okay. The top area by HDI is actually Benguet. At their HDI is 0.88. Here's Camarines Sur. So this is around, as we can see in the picture, in the legend, this is between 0.6 to 0.649, or medium. We are categorized as medium in terms of HDI. Okay, so this is again a ranking. As you can see, the top region, okay, with the highest HDI is NCR. Okay, it's classified as high human development, and then among the medium human development is Bicol region. Yan. So we are the 13th of 17 regions with the highest HDI. Now, among the provinces, pang ilan ba yung Camarines Sur? It's tied with Albay, sorry, not only Albay, it's tied with Misamis Occidental, Surigao del Sur, Albay, Camiguin, and Davao del Norte at 0.6. So classified under medium human development. That means our life expectancy combined with our GNI or gross national income, and then life expectancy point to medium human development. Very far from Benguet's 0.88, which is classified as very high human development as of 2019. This is just before the pandemic. Okay, so with regards to population, Camarines Sur has a growth of 1.27%. This is already slower compared to the 2000 to 2010 average. Okay, but the total population of Camarines Sur, based on the 2020 census, May 1, 2020 census, our total population is now 2,068,244. Of course, the most populous is the city of Naga. Although again, Naga is actually not politically part of Camarines Sur. Naga already has 209,170 residents. Only next to Legazpi of being the most populous city in the Bicol region. Okay. So there we have these information about the population of Camarines Sur. This is the updated projected mid-year population. So our estimate is that by 2025, then I think 2025 will be the next election year. The population will now be at 2.1 million Bicolanos. Oh, sorry, Camarinenses from Camarines Sur. Okay, so that's the projection. Naga by then will already have 229,587 by 2025. Okay. Now, when it comes to labor and employment, basically, this is a rather, some of you might find this too complicated, but this is just to show to us what happened to our economic picture during this time. Okay, in terms of labor and employment, from 2018 to 2020, this is the provincial total employed persons unemployment rate. Okay, so estimated at 807,000 plus total employed persons in Camarines Sur. This declined to 708,000 in 2019 and declined further to 684,000 in 2020 during the pandemic. So thus our employment rate were as follows: 94.6% in 2018, 94.2% in 2019, and went down to 91.1% in 2020. Now, all of this information here tells us that during the pandemic, our unemployment rate drastically increased. Okay, so our unemployment rate increased to 8.9% on average, from 5.4% in 2018, it became 8.9% in 2020. This is already the average. Of course, the unemployment rate during March, April, and May 2020 were a lot higher than this average. And take note also the labor force participation rate. What does this mean? Labor force participation is the combination of the employed and the unemployed. When you say that you are unemployed, there you must satisfy I think that's three things that you must satisfy. You don't have a job, you are looking for a job, and third is you want a job. Okay, you want to work, you are ready to work already. That's the reason why there are also what we call the individuals who are not part of the labor force, usually yung tinatawag na tambay. They are not looking for work really. They don't want to work, so they are not really classified as unemployed. You will only be classified as unemployed if you want work and you currently don't have a job. So when you combine those individuals with jobs with the individuals who don't have jobs but want to work, and they are available, of course, to work, we find the labor force participation. So it's also a good indicator of what's happening in the economy. For example, among the population in Camarines Sur, 15 years and above, 61.8% only of the adult population are either employed or unemployed. This is relatively low, actually. Then it went further down to 58% in 2019 and down to 57% in 2020, especially because probably some members or some Bicolanos, some Camarinenses who are part of the labor force just decided to leave the labor force. There are those who, what we call discouraged workers. Because of the hopelessness of the situation, they might have decided not to look for a job anymore. So they are no longer part of the unemployment rate, actually. So this 8.9% unemployment rate, it may be an understatement. Okay? Probably it's only 8.9% because probably some of the jobless Camarinenses already chose not to look for a job. They have already become discouraged workers. So that's another story, actually. Now, this is underemployment rate. Ano ba yung underemployment rate? There are two kinds. We have the visibly underemployed. These are the individuals who work less than 40 hours per week. Kasi yung full-time work sa atin ay ina-assume na for at least 40 hours in a week nagtrabaho. Okay, these are the visibly underemployed. Yung mga, halimbawa, naglalabada ng isang araw lang, ayan, underemployed yan kasi isang araw lang. So that's less than 40 hours, in a week. Then you also have invisibly underemployed. These are the workers who are already working 40 hours a week, but they are actually overqualified for the job that they are doing. So these are probably professionals doing blue-collar jobs. So take a look at the 2018 underemployment rate ng Camarines Sur. It's very high at 32.9%. Bumaba konti nung 2019 at 30.4%, at because of the pandemic, lalong tumaas na naman siya sa 33.2%. Probably, if not the highest, among the highest underemployment rates in the Philippines. Ibig sabihin, there are many Bicolanos, especially in Camarines Sur, who might be visibly underemployed. They just accept any kind of job, kahit isang oras lang yan or isang araw lang, tatanggapin na nila yan basta may trabaho, even if it's not full-time. And also those who are professionals maybe and just accepted a job that's available, even if it's not actually, it does not match his profession or his expertise, his or her expertise. Alam nating tumaas to kasi ang daming employers na nag-cut back ng anong tawag dito, ng workforce during the pandemic. Nag-lockdown naman or bumaba naman yung anong tawag dito, yung demand sa mga produkto nila, so they don't need so many employees. Kaya yung iba, halimbawa, hinati na lang yung trabaho sa isang linggo. That's practically part of the visibly underemployed. So again, that's why we have this high number. And again, in the entire Philippines, usually the Bicol region has the highest, usually. We have the highest underemployment rate in the Philippines. Okay, so these are the same information actually shown earlier. So let's now move to poverty. So this is the comparison between 2015 and 2018. Okay, as was already pointed out earlier by Dr. Mendoza, we were so happy in 2018 because compared to 2015, as you can see in the bar graphs, this is the Bicol region, bumaba yung poverty incidence between 2015 to 2018, owing to the economic reforms and of course the economic growth being experienced, of course, prior to the pandemic. But this is now part of history. Because of the pandemic, our poverty incidence already increased. For instance, let's go to poverty incidence among population. Okay, yan. No. Is this poverty incidence? Yes, this one. This was based on the first semester of 2021, so we don't have the full year data yet. And thanks to PSA Camarines Sur for providing us with this information. So from 19.3% poverty incidence among families, umakyat siya sa 34.6%. Ibig sabihin, sa bawat 3 pamilyang nasa Camarines Sur, isa doon yung below poverty line. Okay? Below the poverty threshold. Okay? Yan yung ibig sabihin. Ano ba yung poverty threshold? Ito po, kailangan nyo yung kinikita per capita, ibig sabihin per member of the family, dapat merong 11,599 in a year. Okay? Noong 2021, kailangan mo ng 14,378 pesos para lang hindi ka matawag na mahirap. So there are now 34.6% families na yung kinikita nila per head, kasi per capita is 14,378 per year. So mga a little more than 1,000 pesos per month yan per member. Tapos among the population, from 25.9% noong 2018 na poverty incidence, or isa sa 4 na mga taga Camarines Sur ay mahirap, naging 42.2% siya noong 2021. So that's almost half, okay, almost. Or at least 4 sa bawat 10 taga Camarines Sur na ngayon ang mahirap as a result of the pandemic. So this is our picture now. Poverty picture. Now, I would also like to emphasize that that's for the general population. We also have what we call the marginal sectors, yung mga tinatawag na nasa laylayan. And usually their poverty incidence is a lot higher compared to the national overall poverty incidence. And among the poorest, ito na yun, although this is based on 2015 and 2018 data, I believe nothing much has changed when it comes to at least the ranking, that the poorest members of our society are the farmers. See, farmers. Then the fisher folks. In 2018, 1 out of 3 almost ng mga magsasaka ay mahirap. Tapos halos isa sa bawat 4 na mangingisda ang mahirap. Halos ganun din, isa sa bawat 4 na taga rural area ang mahirap. So yung mga nasa rural areas. Of course, children as well. 1 out of 4. Okay, 18% naman yung mga self-employed and unpaid family workers. And women, 16.6%. Medyo mababa yung women. This one is relatively new. 2018 lang lumabas. Yung mga PWD or persons with disability. Anyway, the poorest group or sectors are those in rural areas. Okay? Farmers, fisher folks, tapos yung mga naninirahan sa rural areas. So this matters because Camarines Sur is predominantly agricultural. We are the rice granary of the Bicol region. We export, so to speak, much of our rice production to the other provinces. And then we also have a long shoreline. We have our San Miguel Bay, Lagunoy Gulf in Partido, ang daming isda dyan, and other marine resources. We also have Ragay Gulf in the south. So affected, ang daming mga tao sa Camarines Sur na nandito sa mga sektor na to, mga magsasaka, mangingisda, at mga nasa rural areas. So this is very much relevant even in the 2022 elections, okay? Because poverty has recently picked up and poverty incidence is even higher among these sectors. Okay, so just to emphasize that. Now, when it comes to poverty response and vaccination for Camarines Sur, the total cases as of February 17 is 18,752. Ang active cases na lang daw ay 254. From of course, recently kasi nag-peak na yung ating Omicron cases. So ito medyo bababa na siya. Kaya nasa 254 na lang ang active cases ngayon. At 361 lahat yung namatay sa COVID-19 in the province alone. This is from DOH. Okay, we can see here the 4-week moving average. Ayan, ito yung Delta. Okay, this is Delta. Ito yung Alpha and Beta variants. Ito yung Delta variant. Tapos ito yung Omicron variant. Ayan yung, di ba yung December ang saya-saya ng Pasko, wala halos cases. Pagka New Year, biglang bilis na nag-peak because of the Omicron variant. Ayan, that's it. Halos pareho lang sa yung pattern sa national case. And of course, when it comes to our health facilities, medyo mababa na ngayon yung utilization ng ICU beds, isolation beds, and ward beds. Okay? Kaya binaba na rin yung Camarines Sur and Naga City and the entire Bicol region actually sa alert level to starting 2 days ago until the end of the month. Okay. For vaccination, this is the total administered for the entire Philippines. Okay. This is as of February 9. Ayan. So, ang ating vaccination percentage is now at 56.2%. Medyo mataas ng bahagya sa worldwide average. But this is still far from the 70% target para magkaroon ng herd immunity. Para safe nang lumabas siguro at bumalik sa normal yung ating economic activity. Now, this is from Go Negosyo because I'm having actually a hard time looking for the data on the updated vaccination in the province. So I found this. This is at least, I think, as of provincial data is as of Feb 1, 2022. Ang regional data as of January 23, 2022. So 55.68% pa lang yung sa Bicol region. Only Region 1 and NCR pa lang yung nakaabot na sa at least 70% of the target of the population. And then Legazpi City ang may pinakamataas na vaccination rate. Malapit na silang mag 70%, Legazpi City. Ang Naga, 55.67% pa lang. Iriga City, 55.64%. Okay. So yan pa lang yung status ng ating vaccination. So there's this concept in economics which we call externality. This is why vaccination is very important. While we are not required or we are not obliged to take jabs, okay, it's a very important social responsibility to get vaccinated because we are trying to help lessen infection. And if we lessen infection, there's it's a huge help for our healthcare system. It will not require so many resources, considering our limited resources also for our healthcare system. And also we will be reallocating actually our budget for other things, for more important things other than treatment. Okay, treatment. Umaabot minsan ng milyones ang pagpapagamot sa COVID-19. So that's a huge impact on the economy if everyone, well, hindi naman everyone, but at least based on studies, 70 to 80% of the population gets vaccinated. It creates positive externality because your personal choice lessens the risk of infection. Whereas the pandemic is an example or at least of or being infected is an example of negative externality. When we get infected, even if we don't want to infect others, there's this risk of infecting others. That's why vaccination is the exact opposite of the pandemic or the spread of the disease. Now let's move to the political landscape. Okay, as we continue in this local picture. So by the way, that's where we end our economic picture of Camarines Sur. It's not much different from the rest of the country. Although I must emphasize that Camarines Sur is the province with the highest poverty incidence in the Bicol region and even in Luzon. Okay, even in Luzon, where our province is has the highest poverty incidence as of 2021 based on PSA data, as opposed to other provinces and regions in Luzon. And overall, Bicol is still the poorest region in Luzon. Talagang napag-iiwanan na ng gusto ang Bicol region for so many decades na. Kung ilang taon na yung Pilipinas, diba 125 years na tayo since lumaya sa mga Kastila, parang ganun pa rin yung situation sa Bicol region. That's why this election is very important because our national politics can actually dictate, okay, what will happen to Bicol and specifically Camarines Sur. So this one, I think, captures also the political landscape in the province. This is the controversial iconic Capitol building, which became a center of a conflict between two sides. Yung grupo ni na Andaya, okay? This one is a very infamous picture of the mayor of the town of Pili because he was trying to object or to resist the plan of the camp of this powerful family. One is a representative of second district, and the other one is the governor. The other one is the provincial administrator of Camarines Sur. And so this is very much related to the talk earlier of Dr. Mendoza about thin and fat dynasties. Anyway, so this one is the planned iconic capital in Pili, but this is supposed to be constructed not in the old site of the capital, yung giniba na. Kung nakapunta na kayo ng capital complex ngayon, patag na, no, ground zero na yung dating building, which by the way was constructed under the term of I think yung kung hindi man si LRV yung nauna sa kanya, ano, so wala na yun, pero hindi doon itatayo itong iconic Capitol building, doon siya sa malapit sa papuntang Karoy-Royan, Pili. That's why this became controversial for those who are not familiar with the issue, because this lot behind this billboard is an agricultural land. May irrigation pa yan, so technically pwede pa siyang magamit for agricultural purposes. Pero dahil gusto nilang itayo yung Capitol building, kahit may mga ano pa, as in, kung makikita yung picture dyan, golden, tama ba? Golden na yung color, which means malapit na dapat yung palay pwede nang anihin. Pero the camp of the capital at least wanted to dump, syempre may dumping, yung mga truck ng lupa, they dumped it on the rice field. So syempre yung mayor ng Pili, because this is part of his jurisdiction, ayan, pumunta siya doon, tapos naghubad siya dyan actually sa may highway kasi to again, if you're not familiar, this is part of Maharlika Highway. So yeah, nagkaroon dyan ng commotion, para maghuhubad daw siya to protest the action of the 𝑵𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 in pushing for the dumping of soil ba yung tawag doon, on the rice field. Ayan. So ang kinakampihan dito basically ng grupo ni Andaya and this one, Mayor Bongalonta, yung mga magsasakang affected ng pagtatayo nitong iconic building. Ayan. So sa ngayon natigil na yung issue na yan. But basically this one is a perfect picture for what's going on in our province. Ayan. 'Di ba? Ang ganda ng capital, tapos despite the economic picture we have seen earlier, pero ganyan yung magiging itsura daw dapat ng ating capital. Now, we are all familiar with this photo. This is from Rappler. This is the proclamation rally in Naga City of Vice President Lely Robredo and her tropa, Team Robredo Pangilinan. Ayan. So around 20,000, depending on your sources, between 15 to 20,000 individuals attended the rally. And how will this affect our local politics? Well, in Naga City alone, all mayoralty candidates were there. They are actually supporters of VP Leni. So wala namang mayoralty candidate against not under VP Leni. Again, this is a uniquely Filipino phenomenon. In other countries, of course, you will only have one candidate, okay, per party, per president, that is. So, halimbawa, ang partido nyo ay LP, isa lang talaga dyan yung candidate under LP na ang sinusuportahan mo halimbawa ay si VP Leni. Kasi ibang candidates dapat, iba namang partido, ibang president naman dapat. But again, this is uniquely Filipino. So all mayoralty candidates in Naga are united in supporting VP Leni. So for president. So walang ano dyan. Maglalaban lang silang tatlo, pero yung locally, pero yung kanilang sinusuportahan sa national is Robredo. In Camarines Sur, there are basically three strong contenders. Yung pang-apat, si Cabal, hindi masyadong popular, pero may isa pa actually yung si Cabal. I forgot the first name. But basically, these are the three groups na magko-compete sa capital. Yung Team 1 Camsur, the group of 𝑵𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍, yung Anduyog group ni Andaya and 𝑵𝒂𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒂𝒍, and of course yung Papin group. So dito sa tatlo, to make the long story short, obviously from the picture, the group of Anduyog supports the candidacy of VP Leni. Okay, at least VP Leni. They don't have any official declaration of support yet for Kiko Pangilinan. Ito namang obviously ito din yan. Sama-sama tayong babangon muli. Sounds familiar. The group of Papin is supporting BBM. Yan. From what I read, Papin is a relative of the Marcoses anyway, so that's not a surprise. Pero again, talking about dynasties, you can see here the daughter of the vice governor running also for board member in the 3rd district of Camarines Sur, along with Charipante. This one is the campaign poster of 𝑵𝒂𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 and Rinconada. That's why you can see their Team 1 Rinconada, but their group as a whole is called Team 1 Camsur. Ayan. They are not supporting any presidential candidate though. They're only supporting Sara Duterte for vice president. According to El Rey 𝑵𝒂𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒂𝒍, their members in Team 1 Camsur is free to choose. They can support Leni Robredo or any other presidential candidates, but they are not, according to El Rey 𝑵𝒂𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒂𝒑, he's not going to endorse any candidate, as opposed to Albay, wherein practically all gubernatorial candidates are supporting VP Leni. Pero dito, the 𝑵𝒂𝒂𝒕s are quiet, not endorsing anyone for the presidency. Pero itong Anduyog naman, they have already expressed support for VP Leni, and the Papin group is supporting, of course, Bongbong Marcos. So some issues related to this are as follows. Ayan, sa party list naman, so far we have at least 4. I'm not sure if I missed any party list that have their roots in Bicol and their platform primarily for the Bicol region. Of course, everyone is familiar with Ako Bicol. Tapos yung Kusog Bicolan dyan ni Sir Noel de Luna, an opponent of Camsur 3rd District Representative Bordado for in Congress, as Bunyog party list, and Bicol Saro. Only so far, only KB and Bunyog, Kusog Bicolandia and Bunyog, have officially declared their support for VP Leni. According to an informant, Ako Bicol also supports VP Leni. But so far, when it comes to campaign posters and paraphernalia, ang meron pa lang so far ay KB with VP Leni, tas yung Bunyog din with VP Leni. Yung Ako Bicol so far, I have yet to see. At least on a personal level, I'm not sure if you have already seen campaign posters of Ako Bicol also with VP Leni as well. Bicol Saro is not supporting Leni Robredo. Ayan. Their endorser is the superstar who also hails from Iriga in Camarines Sur, Iriga City, and she already has thrown her support to Marcos Jr. Ayan. So although officially we have yet to see also the declaration of Bicol Saro, but probably because of their endorser, there's this leaning towards Marcos Jr. Now, this has become viral several weeks ago when 11 mayors of Camarines Sur reportedly supporting Marcos Jr. and dropped, of course, ditching Robredo. So malaking news siya kasi ibig sabihin hindi talaga united daw yung mga taga Camarines Sur in supporting Robredo. So among these 11, although nasa picture lang yata, this is Romualdez, so not a mayor. Si Bongbong Marcos, si Chavit Singson. So ang mayor lang dyan ito, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lang nasa picture. Ito, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. Yan. Si Fermin Mabolo and his daughter, sa kanila, yung 11 na pamalita na suportado si Bongbong Marcos, dalawa kaagad yung nag-deny na hindi nila sinusuportahan because they are really part of Anduyog. The group of 𝑵𝒂𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒂𝒍, the congressman of 4th District of Camarines Sur, and Andaya, who used to sit as the district representative of 1st District of Camarines Sur, now running for governor, they have 19 mayors, and 2 of the 11 who were reported to be supporting Marcos Jr. already denied that they are supporting Marcos Jr. Ayan. Kasi anduyog nga raw sila. So they are part of the 19 mayors supporting Leni Robredo for the presidency. Tapos dito sa natitirang siyam, yung isa, Mayor of Sipocot, dininay niya, sabi niya lang idol niya raw si Jess Robredo, but did not categorically say that he is supporting Leni Robredo. Sabi niya lang, ninong niya sa kasal si Robredo, so imposibleng susuporta raw siya kay Marcos Jr. Tapos yung isa naman, sabi hindi pa raw, yung isa namang mayor of Calabanga denied also. Sabi niya wala pa naman daw silang napipili sa group nila. Kung sino daw yung susuporta ng group nila, yun daw yung kanilang dadalhing presidente. Ang vocal pa lang so far na sumusuporta kay Marcos Jr. ay ang mayor ng San Fernando, si Mayor Fermin Mabolo, who by the way is the brother of the Chief of Staff of Congressman Gabi Bordado, a known ally of Robredo. So ito yung dalawang mayor, si Mayor Franco of Pamplona and Mayor Reyes of Milaor, who denied supporting Marcos. But they were actually there in this meeting. Ayan, wala lang sila sa picture. Ayan. Although, ayan, hindi naman sila nagganyan na sign. So madali nilang napasinungalingan yung report. And they were actually present during the proclamation rally of VP Leni last February 8. So this is the photo of the official proclamation or declaration of support by the group of Anduyog. So this is, for those who are not familiar, this is the fourth district representative of Camarines Sur, si Congressman 𝑼𝒑𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍, the third district representative of Camarines Sur, Congressman Bordado. This is fourth district board member J.J. Pilapil, former congressman and ano din siya dati, di ba? DBM Secretary Rolando Andaya, and Mayor Madel Gazmen of Iriga, who is running against Governor 𝑵𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 for the seat of 5th district representative. So they have declared their unequivocal support for Leni Robredo. This is just a few days after the news about the 11 mayors supporting BBM broke in. Talagang mabilisan nilang ginawa yung activity to throw their support behind Robredo. So overall, among the governors of Camarines Sur, ang sumusuporta lang talaga explicitly, nag-declare na talaga official yung support, Governor 𝑵𝒂𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 of Albay. Yan, siya lang talaga. Tapos lately, sinabi, dahil napamalita si Governor Kuwa ng Catanduanes na sinusuportahan din si Bongbong Marcos, nag-declare din siya that Leni is his president. Ayan. Tapos you have Governor Chis Escudero has not categorically stated yet whether he is supporting or endorsing Leni Robredo, pero may dalawa na at least din, dalawang governors na nag-declare ng support sa kay Marcos, Governor Talyado of Camarines Norte, and of course Governor Co of Masbate. Ayan. So this is of course big news for the other camp, yung mga opponents ni VP Leni, because this somehow creates an image of crack within the so-called solid Bicol vote, supposedly, to catapult VP Leni to the presidency. Catapult talaga ang magandang term kasi we all know from the recent surveys that she is really a far second. So it would really take so much effort on their team to really win the presidency on May 9, 2022. So yan. So now the question is, where are we really going as a nation and as a province? So probably this will help answer this question kung papunta nga ba tayo saan. Ayan, ito yung magandang tanong, Quo Vadis Filipinae or Quo Vadis Camarines Sur, where are we going? So according to Edmund Burke, this is actually quoted infinite times already, but this is very appropriate until now. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Diba? Kasi hinahayaan na lang nating mangyari ang mga bagay-bagay. kahit masama. So if this persists, then evil would really triumph. So I encourage everyone, let us all do our share to ensure that evil would not prosper, so that all good men and women do everything to fight evil in all its form. So we will all do this together para sa ekonomiya at para sa bayan. Just mabalos po. God bless you all.
And salamat din, Sir Bulao. That was quite an enlightening and comprehensive presentation as well. No? And also for thank you for providing us a Bicol and or Camarines Sur context. No? Obviously, this presentation is important because we need to know where we at in terms of the economic realities, no? As well as the current political landscape in the region, and hopefully magamit nga ang mga impormasyong ito in deciding which programs and policies to support these coming national elections. No? And some of us, kasi I believe some of us are more national, no? And sometimes we forget about the local realities. So I think Mr. Bulao's presentation helped us, be more familiar with the political and socio-economic landscape of the province. Now, at this point, we recognize the presence of the students of College Ignition Formation Program and National Service Training Program, as well as the Social Sciences Department of the Ateneo University. We thank the faculty, especially our department chairpersons, Ma'am Judith Vergel de Jos and Ma'am Mary Joyce Bulao. We also acknowledge the cooperation of national and the regional officers of PAPSAS. Thank you, PAPSAS. Nanonood din daw mga students natin, no, political science students and public administration. And they told me they are actively taking notes din daw. Now we come to the open forum. At this point, may I now invite our reactors, no, to share their insights or questions relative to the presentations of our two speakers, Dean Ron Mendoza and Mr. Roland John Bulao. And viewers are also welcome to post their reactions in the comment section, of our Adnu OSA YouTube channel. We will try to read them all later after the reaction. Now, for our first reactor, may I call on Ms. Eliza Silvano. She is the Legal Management Institute of Ateneo Dinaga University, Elmian's president. Good afternoon, Eliza. Thank you for joining us. Is Eliza here already?
Hello, sir. Hello, everyone. Audible and visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Elisa Francis Salvino, a third-year BSBA legal management student from Ateneo University. First, I would like to thank Adnu Office of Student Affairs, Adnu OSA, for organizing this very timely and informative event for the youth, and most especially for giving us an event that will help us in gaining cognizance about what exactly is happening in status quo, especially in the context of the Philippines. I would also like to thank Dean Ronald Mendoza and Mr. Roland John Bulao for that wonderful discussion on the socio-economic and political landscape of the Philippines, both in the national and regional level. Right off the bat, the country is currently facing a battle on two fronts: a health crisis that is directly attacking the people's immune system, and an economic crisis that is circumspectly obliterating the livelihoods of the toiling masses. It has disrupted daily consumption, and worse, it paralyzed global economy. I think we can all agree that this terrifying and ambiguous environment aggravates social isolation. It aggravates social isolation. It aggravates economic regression due to the fact that it affects marginalized sectors, vulnerable sectors of the society. This social, economic, and psychological toll of this pandemic is very, very lethargic. The survival cost is rapidly being matched by huge financial costs. Humanity used to be about coming together. Now it is about staying apart. In the Philippines particularly, the political, economic, and social state of the country is disastrous, as we can see in status quo. The direct attack of the pandemic on the economy and functionality of the people has exposed the multiplicity of flaws that runs in the country's system. From this, we could say that the contradiction of priorities between the working class, which is survival, security, livelihood, it comes into clash with the priorities of the upper class, which is profit maximization, asset preservation, and loss mitigation. It has been visible that at its core, this pandemic is not just a public emergency, it is also an economic plight as well. As a general rule, I would like to grab this very wonderful idea from Dean Ronald Mendoza's presentation on how he told us that even if we are in a nation that is currently being isolated, what we need is inclusion. In a nation that has been hampered by isolation, we can only attain tangible progress through inclusion. These are the things that we need to remember as active members and hopefully as voters in the upcoming 2022 elections. As a general rule, a leader's application of governance plays an essential role in the prevention and eradication of any national issue. Therefore, our collective power as a nation begins with our individual power to vote. This begins with the power of democracy. We have a stand on what and who will be our leaders are. We have a stand on who we choose to be, on what kind of regime we want. Every vote has the power to determine what lies ahead in the future, if it's change for the better or change for the worse. A single vote can oust a tyrant, it can topple a dictator, and it can make way for good governance. Voting is one thing, and voting wisely is another. In choosing our leaders, it is always important to look at their principles, assess their platforms, and discern their track records. Let us not be swayed by candidates who make empty promises about the future. Real leaders, even prior to their candidacy, and as shown by the wonderful presentation of our speakers, we have to look for candidates who have already proven themselves worthy by contributing in legislations, attending Senate meetings, and lobbying for human rights. Overall, this talk was a reminder that grounds us to our ultimate responsibility to contribute in the betterment of society. As a fellow youth, and as a young citizen of the Philippines, I hope that we will remember that we have the power to vote, and we have the power in attaining what is ideal for democracy. And I hope that this talk was able to inform us on what we should look for in leaders, and how we could be more cognizant and aware of what is happening on the ground. That is all. Thank you very much for inviting me po.
All right. Maraming salamat din, Eliza. We would like also to request our speakers, no, Dean Ron and Sir Roland, to just basically take notes of the insights and comments of our reactors. For easy facilitation, we will basically finish all the reactors unless they have questions addressed to a specific speaker. No? So with that, salamat again, Eliza, for highlighting the importance of inclusivity and also attaching it to the principles of good governance. No? And indeed, that is actually what we need, no, coming into this election. And I hope all of us can basically know how to operationalize this principle of good governance in terms of the platforms and policies presented to us by the candidates, no? Not only national but also in local politics. Okay, maraming salamat. Let's now proceed to our second speaker. I think Mr. Rene Gumba, Chief of the Naga City's Public Safety Office, is with us now. Hello, Sir Rene. Good afternoon po.
Yes, good afternoon. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Naatasan ako na magbigay ng reaksyon doon sa dalawang panayam na ibinigay sa atin ngayong hapon. Totoo, napakahalaga ng pagsusuri ng lipunan at yung pagsusubok natin na intindihin yung mga nangyayari sa paligid natin. Itong ginagawa ninyo ay napakalaking ambag upang patuloy na lumalim yung pagkaunawa, hindi lamang ng mga Atenista, kundi ng mga kababayan natin. So yung usapin ay hindi ko pinalampas dahil mahalagang maibahagi yung ganung mga pananaw. Dalawang bagay yung binigyan ng pansin kadalasan sa pagsusuri ng lipunan, yung mga struktura ng politika, ng ekonomiya at maging ng kultura yung binibigyan ng diin. Sa kasalukuyang kalagayan natin, natutuwa ako doon sa ibinigay ni Dr. Mendoza, yung usapin ng payat at mataba na dinastiya. isang bagong distinction para sa akin nung panahon namin, yung usapin lang ng political dynasty ay walang distinction kung payat yan o mataba. Pero napakahalaga ngayon na maintindihan natin na may mga dynasty na conscious doon sa pananaw ng iba at may mga dynasty na walang pakialam kung lahat sila nakaupo na o hindi sa posisyon. It is in that context that I just would like to share at least comments on 3 areas. Basically, economic and political. Dalawa lang yun sa politika. Usapin ng eleksyon at usapin ng pamamahala. Dahil right now, I am recently connected with the local government unit, with the city government. Una doon sa usapin ng ekonomiya, mahalaga rin maintindihan natin na yung usapin ng local development ay hindi dapat napapailalim lang o napagwawalang bahala sa usapin ng national development. Most people would be talking about development, about the entire Philippines. But very few would really venture into matters of regional and even area-specific development. And we would like to encourage more of that. And hopefully, even the academe will be the main arena for discussions like that. So the localization of development should also mean encouraging more local industries to develop. So parang yung pagnenegosyo ay hindi dapat nasa Makati lang. Yung mga startup ay hindi dapat yung mga taga Manila lang. So mahalaga na dito rin sa ating rehiyon, sa ating probinsya, sa ating lungsod, yung ekonomiya ay lumalago dahil may mga industriya tayo na umuusbong. So mahalagang mabigyan ng pansin yun, hindi lamang ng gobyerno, kundi kahit ng pribadong sektor. And right now, as it seems we are eventually graduating from the COVID pandemic, hopefully, we hope that more local entrepreneurs would be coming up, would be resuming their economic activities dahil napakahalaga pong angkla nun para sa pag-unlad ng ating lokalidad. And that has always been my take on the economic setup in the country. We need more attention to local entrepreneurs, to regional development, to local development. So usapin nyo ng ekonomiya. Pangalawa ay yung usapin ng politika. Dalawang bagay lang yung gusto kong bigyan ng pansin. Yung una yung usapin ng eleksyon at pangalawa yung usapin ng pamamahala. Yung una, sa usapin ng eleksyon, pag mga kandidato ang kaharap natin, mahalaga rin na meron tayong kamalayan kung ano yung hahanapin sa kanila at kung ano yung posisyon na gusto nilang pasukan. So it's not all about the personality or the criteria or the character. Try to match also the position they are aspiring for with their qualifications. And that it's like applying for a job. Kung ang tindingan ng interview sa iyo, pag ikaw ay papasok bilang empleyado, ganun din dapat katindi ang pagsusuri ng mga kandidato na nag-a-apply sa anumang posisyon. And the voters, I think, would need a deeper self-examination at this point. Minsan kasi hindi lang yan politiko yung may kasalanan. Minsan may kultura rin yung mga botante na dahil panahon ng eleksyon, samantalahin natin dahil minsan lang mangyari. Kung ganun pa rin yung ating pananaw sa puntong ito, mahalaga yung pinapaintindi na hinaharap ang nakataya dito, yung hinaharap ng ating mga kabataan, yung nakataya dito. At panghuli, sa eleksyon, yung mga institusyon na kadalasan ay hindi maingay sa panahon ng eleksyon, nararapat siguro na mag-ingay na rin. Halimbawa, dito ay yung simbahan at yung mga usapin ng partido politikal. Una, doon sa simbahan, kadalasan hindi yan namimili ng kandidato, di ba? O nag-i-endorso ng kandidato. Pero sinasabi nila na matindi yung problema ngayon, may pangangailangan na baka mas kategorikal yung gawing intervensyon ng ating mga institusyon na ito. Yung political parties, medyo mahaba pa yung lalakbayin natin bago maging mature yung ating party system. Hindi pa ngayon usapin ng partido yung eleksyon, pagkos usapin pa ito again ng mga individuals, ng mga pangalan na kilala. So yun yung eleksyon bilang institusyon, ang laki pa ng kailangang trabahuhin natin upang magkaroon ng malaking pagbabago. And hopefully the academy will continue to perform that function and work with the local community. Panghuli, itong usapin ng pamamahala. Governance, we have always been guided by the present setup. Tayo ay nasa isang unitary presidential setup. Alam niyo, ang daming innovations sa mga lokal na pamahalaan, pero kahit gaano kagagaling yan, manipis at maliit pa yung kapangyarihang binibigay sa kanila. So mahalaga rin na matingnan yung ganoong aspeto, so that when we talk about reforms in governance, it should not only translate into better national government, it should also translate into stronger and more effective local governments. At yung takot ng iba na baka ito daw ay kontrolin lang ng mga dinastiya, bibigyan lang ng kanya-kanyang kaharian yung mga politiko, we hope that this consciousness of strengthening, of empowering our local communities would translate into better local governance. Kasi kung binigyan mo ng kapangyarihan, yung mga komunidad, yung mga lokal na pamahalaan, napakahalaga na napipigilan ito yung tinatawag nating mga dinastiya. So at the end of the day, we are saying we work for reforms, but again, do not forget that we work locally and hopefully we can contribute nationally. Thank you. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Sir Rene Gumba. And kung if you are also aware, ito rin yung taon kung saan ipapatupad na ng bansa ang Mandanas ruling. So ibig sabihin, magkakaroon ng mahigit na kapangyarihan ng ating local government units in addressing the inequality in so many aspects, no, financial resources, as well as improving the capacity of our LGUs, no. But obviously, pwede yung talakayin sa ibang topic. But yun din yung parang gustong tumbukin natin, no, na ang issue ng eleksyon ay hindi natatapos sa May 2022. No? Ito ay isang napakalaking pag-usapin. No? So ang ating governance doesn't end in election but also after the election and before the next coming election. Salamat, Sir Rene. Now we proceed to our next reactor. Our next reactor is Attorney Maria Carmela Francia Peña, Director of Ignatian Legal Apostolate Office here in Ateneo University. Magandang hapon po, Attorney Peña.
Good afternoon. Thank you. It was truly a comprehensive presentation from both speakers. One of the three reasons of inequality and poverty in the Philippines, as concretely presented by Director Bulao, is the political concentration of power, as extensively discussed by Dr. Mendoza. I totally agree. While we do not begrudge these dynasties of their accomplishments, let us not descend into thinking that it is the best that we can do. We must remember that we hold in our hands our future and necessarily of future generations. Although our vote stands as one and equal among others, we have the responsibility, even the duty, to go out of our comfort zones and actively help in the education of all voters. Knowledge is always power. An informed vote is the ultimate power of the citizenry. And one effective way of bringing about an informed vote is what we call a marketplace of ideas. A marketplace of ideas that embraces vibrant debate on public issues, which should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open. I truly believe everyone here is very much equipped with the faculties necessary in engaging in this marketplace of ideas. While an informed vote does not automatically solve all the problems plaguing the Philippines, it does, however, lead us to a step in the right direction. We already know where we are at. The presentations this afternoon have expansively apprised us of the status quo We need better servant leaders. Look at their track records. Publish them, advocate for them, and educate others. Yours is this responsibility. Remember, the Philippines is a democratic and republican state. Sovereignty resides in the people, and all government authority emanates from them. That is you. Government authority emanates from you. It all comes down to your vote and how you value that choice. Suffrage right does not only mean the right to vote. It necessarily includes the right to voice out that choice publicly. Publicity in the hopes of persuading others towards the election of a certain candidate. You are the future. An informed vote is the youth vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Peña. And also thank you for highlighting the importance of youth vote this coming 2022 election. Salamat, Attorney. I think mamaya siguro yung mga tanong yung mga estudyante natin tungkol sa iba't ibang, particularly sa anti-dynasty bill na inahain kung bakit tumatagal siya. Alinsunod doon sa presentation kanina ni Dean Ron. Salamat, Attorney Peña. Now we proceed to our last student reactor. I think she's here already. Our friend from University of 𝑵𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 will... Okay, she's not around. Okay, sige. That means thank you, Eliza, Sir Rene Gumba, and Attorney Peña for your wonderful reactions. May we now request our speakers to give their insights or also comments or reactions to the insights shared by our reactors. First, let's hear it from Dean Ron.
Hi. Thank you very much, Professor Murillo, for the chance to react and also for all the insights shared by the reactors. No, if you will permit me to speak in Taglish para total puro mga Pilipino naman po tayo ngayon dito sa usapin natin. Ang nagiging challenge po natin yung ating reforma na gusto nating itulak nasa kamay ng mga tao na may conflict of interest dun sa reforma na yan. Kasi in fact, yung isa sa mga reforma, yung dynasty regulation, will actually debilitate their hold on power, which they are benefiting from right now. So that's yung po yung sinubukan kong i-describe dun sa aking presentation na very circular at very self-preserving yung inequalities ng bansa. Inequality in the economy, inequality in politics, at saka yung inequality in society, yung some are vulnerable, others are more adaptive, just because they are on top, no? So yan po yung ating challenge. So I guess the thing that might interest our young people today is how do we break from this inequality trap? Kasi trap talaga siya eh. Habang nagkakaroon tayo ng krisis, maraming nangangailangan, kailangan mo ng patron. Kung nawalan ka ng trabaho, nawalan ka ng source of income, tapos wala naman tayong social safety net na maayos, kulang siya, yung ayuda nagkulang nga. This was one of the points raised earlier by our other presenter. The pandemic response was inadequate, no? In fact, I call it pandemic mismanagement. Hindi maganda yung pandemic response natin. So babalik tayo dun sa ugat ng decision making, which is how do we select our leaders? Doon yan mapupunta palagi in my view. And if we address that, then the rest will naturally follow because those leaders are the ones who will craft policies and then they will also implement the same policies kasi nandun sa legislative tsaka nandun sa executive yung fat dynasties ngayon eh. Pareho na nilang nahawakan. In fact, pati yung technocracy, hinahawakan na rin ng fat dynasty. Hindi pa lang namin na collect yung information pero na-appoint na rin sila into government positions and they end up in non-elected positions as well. Positions that we hope are based on merit and competency rather than just family connections and last name, no? So lahat po tayo nagtuturo tayo ng mga bata at sinasabi natin sa kanila, mag-aral kayong mabuti, pag-usayan nyo, paghahanda nyo before you join the workforce, at yung mga pinakamahusay sa inyo, yun ang mabibigyan ng pagkakataon. Kaya nga kayo kailangan mag-aral ng mabuti. But our society is becoming less and less merit-based. The meritocracy is actually becoming weaker. And we're seeing a lot of this nepotism and fat dynastic expansion that is surely going to weaken our bureaucracy in the longer run, if not immediately. So, natuwa ako dun sa reaction ni Alisa. So maraming salamat. You actually reminded me of a young congresswoman in the Bronx. Baka dapat, Professor Murillo, ipaalam natin sa mga bata yung batang mga pinuno na nag-emerge sa iba-ibang demokrasya. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, one of the younger Democrats emerging in the US. I was listening to Alisa and basically she reminded me of that generation that is up and coming. I hope this generation is given a chance to lead. And certainly previous generations were not. Kita na nga natin doon sa Fat Dynasty. Inangkin na nila yung mga positions. At pangitan-pangitan na hindi ito yung best and brightest natin, itong mga nakaharap sa atin ngayon. Let's just be frank about that. So kung mababago natin yan, mabibigyan ng pagkakataon yung mas mahusay, maayos natin yung mga institutions. And Alisa is right. It is inclusion that will contradict exclusion. And exclusion is what is creating inequality. Exclusion for our fisher folk, as the other Professor Bulao was describing, and I quite agree. Our blue economy, the maritime economy of the country, is vastly underdeveloped at kaya madali tayong sagasaan sa dagat, no? Wala tayong lakas diyan at low ang technology ng ating mga mangingisda. So kung hinarap tayo doon sa mga nangaangkin ng teritoryo natin, walang kalaban-laban yung mga mangingisdang Pilipino eh. So kailangan palakasin natin yung sector na yan. And it is a theme that is often called the blue economy in international relations. Yung mga magsasaka na hindi na binuksan natin yung merkado para sa imported rice, pero pinalakas ba natin yung ating mga magsasaka para makapag-compete sila with this inflow of competition? That is almost always the weakness of us economists. We love to promote economic openness and integration, but we don't really do a sufficient job in terms of strengthening the supply side, the institutions that will actually strengthen our supply side response to this openness. So pinapangako natin na papasok yung mga murang produkto, pero tayo naman pwede tayong mag-export, pero hindi naman natin napalakas yung supply side natin. So ang nangyayari, nasasagasaan lang yung domestic capability natin, nawawalan ng mga pagkita, nawawalan ng trabaho, nagkakaroon tuloy ng backlash dun sa openness. Hindi natin mapagpatuloy yung industrialization and economic development natin kasi maraming nasasagasaan at hindi na i-include. Excluded sila doon sa paglago ng ating ekonomiya. So yan yung isa sa mga pinag-aaralan natin ngayon at actually this is hopefully reflected in many of your young people's research focus teaching as well, that the distributive aspects of the economy and our political power, these must all be considered in terms of our policy reforms and the way forward. The more unequal our country is, the more difficult conversations in this country will be moving forward. And you will have groups like ours with really good education and really good futures, and then many other young people who do not have that. And then we begin to wonder, bakit nila binoboto yung isang kandidato na associated with bad governance and dictatorship? It boggles the mind, no? Certainly, I hope in this group, hindi natin halos maintindihan bakit ganun ang boto ng ating mga kababayan. Pero I will end with my hypothesis that the more unequal our country becomes, the more mind-boggling those kinds of patterns will be moving forward, because we no longer understand our own people, and the pockets of inclusion are not enough, and the major part of exclusion is now gripping our politics and our economy. So I'll leave it there, and I thank the reactors for sharing their insights.
Salamat din, Ron. How about you, Sir Roland? Any thoughts and insights you want to share with us after hearing the reactions of our reactors? I mean, why is it that in some local, halimbawa in Naga City, no, without being too biased about it, why is it so common to see participatory kind of governance, and it's so hard to see it and reflect it in so many national arenas, no, or particularly Metro Manila? Because as mentioned, no, inclusion is really important for obvious reason. Why is it that some of our countrymen outside Naga City doesn't appreciate much this type of governance, instead prefer the traditional setup?
Actually, yes, sorry. Actually, Sir Professor Marshall, I've been discussing this with the department chair of the Social Sciences Department, I think a couple of days ago. I was really puzzled, even not only Naga versus the other parts of the country, even Naga versus its surrounding municipalities. Only Naga has embraced this participatory governance / good governance, but the surrounding municipalities, who are also members of the Metro Naga Development Council, has not seen the same practice. Our hypothesis there is that Naga has already tried it, and they have seen, when I say they, the people, okay, because the context of Naga is that under Robredo, Jesse Robredo, in his 18 years as mayor of the city, he was able to bring the government closer to people by consulting them not only with regards to rubber stamp kind of consultation. He really listens to them. Then from the inputs of the people's organization, CSOs, that's why there's the Naga City People's Council, the city government is able to respond to these needs more efficiently, effectively. And it has benefited not only the local government because we are all familiar of the ubos con ubos phenomenon in Naga. The entire Robredo slate, which is now called Team Naga, had na kasi ngayon hindi na. May natapos na yung ubos con ubos, pero for a very long time walang nagiging opposition na nakakapasok sa sanggunian because of this benefit to the group. But on the other hand, the people have also experienced the benefit of being consulted. Sad to say, napag-usapan namin, hindi pa kasi ito natitikman talaga yung term, naramdaman na experience ng mga taga-labas ng Naga. So they don't have any idea. Parang sa iba, ang hunch ko lang dito, personal hunch ko is, napaka-foreign pang concept ng good governance. Parang napaka-abstract niya. Ano bang ibig sabihin mo ng good governance? Ano bang ibig sabihin mo ng participatory governance? Kasi may mga tao na halimbawa, specific case, para dun sa taong yun, nakita niya yung kanyang lisensya, 10 years na yung validity, tuwang-tuwa na siya dun kasi may personal effect sa kanya. Probably for that person, that's already good governance kasi yung pangangailangan niya na wag pabalik-balik pupila sa isang government agency para lang mag-renew ng license every 3 years, na-solve. Halimbawa naman, magsasaka ka, na-solve yung problema mo sa patubig kasi libre na ngayon, although sa economics may marami economists ang against sa libreng patubig kasi it has negative effects also. Pero syempre kung ikaw yung magsasaka, that's positive. Hindi ba yun yung good governance kaya sa taong yun? Kasi ang problema niya, patubig, paano niya babayaran yung patubig, and here comes the free irrigation. Hindi na-solve na. So ang my guess is yan, napaka-foreign pa nito, hindi pa siya experience sa maraming lugar, not even in the Bicol region, para maging mainstream. And this is, I think, one of the challenges of the Robredo campaign kasi nandun naka-anchor yung kanyang campaign. Good governance, participation, pero sa ibang bahagi ng Pilipinas, halos wala pa silang nararanasang similar, approach when it comes to local governance.
I see Sir Rene raising his hand. Sir Rene, you can unmute yourself po.
Sige po, parang gusto ko rin ibahagi lang yung parang isang pananaw din na kinikilala natin yung naiambag ni Secjes, ng pamunuan ng Robredo at yung ubos kung ubos. Pero mahalaga rin kilalanin yung tradisyon ng people's empowerment sa loob ng lungsod. Yung napakahalagang papel ng mga political organizations, political blocs. Alam nyo, mukhang noong bata pa ako, dito nakikita-kita yung Bayan Muna, yung Pandayan para sa Sosyalistang Pilipinas, yung PRRM, iba't ibang bloke na magkakaaway at nagkaroon ng pagkakataon na sa Naga nag-uusap-usap. Traditionally, kaaway nito ang gobyerno. At sila yung nag-oorganisa ng mga sektor, urban poor, labor, and others. At dumating sa punto na na-timing nila na yung pamunuan ni Secjes ay may mga bukas na kasamahan sa loob. So doon nag-umpisa yung parang, anong tawag ko doon? Yung dialogo, yung engagement nitong civil society organization natin, yung mga NGO constituency natin with the local government unit. At tingnan nyo kung saan yung naabot ng very dynamic na engagement na yon. Mas doon ko inuugat yung tradisyon ng Naga na timing na nakikinig din yung pamunuan ni Secjes Robredo noon. So yun lang po. Salamat.
Maraming salamat, Sir Rene. I want to react more, pero I think we have to entertain some questions from our participants. No, again, we invite you, those watching us via YouTube channel, to share your comments or questions to our panels and reactors. Do we have questions now? Okay. Okay, we have a question from Miss Jean Flor-Delis. She's asking, I would like to thank the speakers for the very informative and timely presentations. May I ask po, Dr. Ronald Mendoza, there are already laws po implemented to control political dynasty. And if there are already existing, why it is still allowed po? Are there any enabling laws, Professor Mendoza?
Thank you, Jean Grace. Actually, kailangan natin ng enabling law which will then define the dynasties. Kaya naging standard replyan ng mga dynasty na wala naman daw definition ng dynasty. You know, it has become sort of a legal cop-out na dahil hindi pa nagawa yung batas, walang way para ipigilan ng dynasties. Pero sa totoo lang, actually, even before the discussion on the dynasty regulation or anti-dynasty law, even before our studies, actually, meron namang tinatawag na delikadesa na, you know, kahit sa amin, taga Quezon ako Quezon province, you know, meron mga lugar doon na iisang pamilya lang, sila lang palagi na sila yung congressman. Tapos yung iba, sila palagi yung mayor. Palaging merong constraint, may norm na pagka nagsabay-sabay kayo, medyo pangit tingnan yan. Parang ginawa nyo ng family business yung gobyerno. So nag-uusap-usap yung mga elite at nag-uusap-usap ang mga tao at parang nag-ano na lang sila na, okay, kung iisa lang pamilya dito pero pinoprotektahan naman nila yung pangalan nila, ayaw nilang masira sa corruption, maganda rin naman yung pressure ng continuity na ayaw nung apo na masira yung pangalan ni lolo at ni tatay, right? So may continuity na ganyan. Pero yan ay nawala actually in the last, I think, 1 or 2 decades. Nagkaroon ng extreme form of sabay-sabay o fat dynasty. Tapos habang tinutulak yung mga combinations at hindi tayo pumapalag bilang mga Pilipino, katulad nung mag-asawang congressman at congresswoman sa Taguig, magkatabing distrito, parehong tumakbo, parehong nanalo, congress people pareho. There was a pushback, no? The people were saying, teka, parang ano na yan, yung bahay nyo ba, nasa first district yung isa, tapos yung kalahati nasa second district, parang naging katatawanan, di ba? Pero ang habang tinutulak yung papayag tayong lahat na tanggapin na lang yun, nagiging normal. tapos hindi na nawawala na yung ating laban dun sa pangitan-pangitan naman na mali, right? So ngayon, actually, I will tell you now na I'm actually asked to say bakit masama ang Fat Dynasty. Imbis na sila yung tanungin natin, ano bang mabuting na idudulot nyo at sabay-sabay kayong tumatakbo? Baliktad. Yung Dean ng School of Government ang tinatanong nila na bakit masama yung Fat Dynasty? Eh nandun yun sa saligang batas natin na tinatawag ng 1987 Constitution na i-define ng Kongreso ang dynasties para magkaroon tayo ng anti-dynasty law. Pero dahil nga natanggap, naging normal, which is I think a bad part of our political culture. Baliktad na yung tanong. Kumbaga, bakit sila, bakit kailangan palitan? Bakit kailangan tanggalin? And of course, we are generating all of this research to try and push for that. But really, Jean Grace, kailangan ng maraming kabataan na talagang magsabi na enough is enough, tama na, sobra na. At it is your generation that is being robbed of your leadership opportunities dahil sila lang pangita-pangita kahit nabugok yung mga apot nila, third or fourth generation, mananalo pa rin, gagawin pa rin governor, gagawin pa rin congressman, pangitang-pangita na wala namang kakayahan. So tuwing may crisis tayo, tuwing may challenge tayo, hindi nila makayanan na i-lead tayo through the reforms, through the crisis. And we can see it in the incompetence. We can see it in the corruption. So sana magising yung kabataan, and I hope, at least starting with this group of about 1,000 young people magising dun sa reality na yan. Thank you.
Right. Sir Roland, you want to add something onto that?
No, I'm good. Okay.
Okay. Actually, I remember, Dean Ron, the Senate hearing last time, 2018 ba yun? That was the first time I heard you talking about the Fat and Thin dynasty in the Philippines and how it is related to the underdevelopment of some areas in the country. I remember it was Senator Kiko Pangilinan who proposed the anti-political dynasty law or bill. Yeah, and nothing happened because Congress is dominated by the political dynasty or yung mga yung Pamilya Incorporated. And I remember.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to react quickly na the challenge, of course, is kung mapapasa natin yung batas na yan, merong makakapasok na mga batang bagong pinuno. Pagpakapasok ng batang bagong pinuno na yon, on the legislative side, yung marami nating ina-advocate na mga reasonable reforms na matagal nang nakapending, pwede na ngayon magkaroon ng chance sa botohan. Tapos on the executive side, magkakaroon ng chance ng better implementation ng mga reforma. Kasi kailangan ng batas at saka kailangan ng implementation. Sa ngayon, parehong hawak ng bad governance. So yun ang kailangan nating i-unclog.
Yeah. Listen, mga kabataan. Well, if you look at the data of COMELEC, more than 50% of our registered local voters are youth. Although there is no youth vote black, pero it's a challenge for our youth to really elect the better leaders. Okay, so do we still have more questions here? Dumadami na, no? Okay, a question from Gabriel. Sabi niya, what are the ways to improve human development as a simple citizen with little power? I think they're talking about their participation in governance, even if you are not in the position. By position, you mean you don't have a position in the government, perhaps, no? Sige. Anyone po? Sir Roland, Sir Dean Ron? Kung tamang interpretation ko sa tanong ni Gabriel, parang I think he's asking
HDI? I guess he's asking yung sa kanya lang kasi of course a lot of things to improve our HDI should come really from policy. Pero sige, very practical since ang HDI naman ay composed ng life expectancy, yung literacy rate at yung income, edukasyon talaga yung pinakamaganda dyan. Personal natin, kaya natin yun So sa mga kabataan ngayon na nagpa-participate, siguraduhin natin matatapos natin yung ating pag-aaral. Kasi grabe ito yung kong sinasabi sa mga estudyante namin. Ang gap ng sweldo, ng sahod, nung fourth year na, tapos hindi pa nakatapos, versus yung nakakuha ng kanyang diploma, ang layo. So, dun pa lang, pag natapos mo yung pag-aaral mo, nakatulong ka sa pagpataas ng literacy rate, plus yung mo pa, mataas na sahod, nakatulong ka pa sa pagpapataas ng GNI. And malamang sa malamang, speaking of life expectancy, kung nakapagtapos ka ng pag-aaral, nag-aral ka na mabuti, most likely, ang mga actions mo sa buhay ay yung hindi mo dadalhin ang sarili mo papunta sa hukay. So, ibig sabihin, you will prioritize your health. You will do the things that will make your life longer. So yun, on a personal or micro level siguro, it all starts with education.
All right. Salamat, Sir Roland. Dean Ron, do you have anything to say, to add to that?
No, I think Prof. Bulao gave a really good answer. Let's keep it there.
I think we can accommodate one more question from Troy. I think marami siyang tanong, no? Pero siguro yung isa na lang. Siguro a context, kasi marami pa rin sa mga kabataan natin na hindi naiintindihan nito, no? Sabi niya, given the recent surveys from SWS and Pulse Asia, how does BBM maintain the top spot even with his absence or absences in several fora and debates? Sinong gusto mo una? Dean Ron, ikaw muna, tapos si Sir Roland, perhaps.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think maraming hypothesis. So rather than frame it as opinions, I will frame it as questions. Ang tanong ko lang is, better informed ba ang ating mga voters ngayon? Merong ebidensyang lumalabas, mga pag-aaral on mis, dis, and malinformation. And we have also done some research in Ateneo Policy Center showing that many young people are actually vulnerable to mis, dis, and malinformation. Tapos, through a survey that we also fielded, minatch namin yan dun sa mga pinipili nila na palagay nila magiging mahusay na pinuno. At nakikita namin na associated nga siya with certain candidates who are also developing a reputation of spreading MDM, yung mis, dis, and malinformation. So I think it is a risk to our democracy, especially in today's political environment na very hyper-connected ang mga citizens natin, lalo na ang mga kabataan. Pero the connection does not always result in high-quality information. At ang resulta minsan is potentially the risk that they are misinformed, disinformed, and malinformed. Right? That's one hypothesis. The other hypothesis is the one that I shared earlier, na manghuhula lang ako na dito sa forum na to, maraming nagtataka bakit ang isang pinuno na associated with dictatorship, pagnanakaw, pagpatay ng tao, at impunity is still being considered as president in this country when we kicked them out with much effort in the 1980s. Bumalik pa sila. And I think there are several hypotheses we need to go through in order to better understand what has happened to our country. Bakit bumalik pa yung sinaktan tayo? This is not even up for debate. It is the subject of many books and journal articles and even media, not just ours, so you cannot say it's biased. It's international media that is reporting on how the Marcoses actually destroyed our economy, abused their power, and stole so much from the Filipinos, and we ended up paying for the better part of 2 decades. Para lang alam po ng mga bata, yung 1983 real GDP per capita ng Pilipinas, na-recover natin noong 2003 lang. Naibalik natin yung nawala noong 1983, 20 years later. And then in 2006, we fully paid for the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant, a nuclear energy project that did not even produce 1 single watt of electricity for our competitiveness and for our industry. Samantalang kailangan natin ng enerhiya para mag-generate ng trabaho at para nga mabawasan ang kahirapan at inequality. So yan yung yan yung situation na naayos natin yon, isa-isa natin inayos yung economic institutions, and then nagkaroon ng pag-aarangkada ng ating ekonomiya just around 2014, 2015, 2016. But that was thanks to many reforms that we put in place. We were in 2016 one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, if not the world. Na lang tayo, na aberya lang tayo again ng bad governance because of the pandemic mismanagement. Doon tayo nadapa na naman, right? So may natitira pa tayong kailangang ayusin. So I guess the question is, so how much appreciation does our people have of all of this history? And the quick answer is, merong konting historical revisionism na kumakalat eh. So baka merong nagiging vulnerable diyan. Pangalawa, as an economist, I will tell you now, in fairness to our people, lumago nga yung ekonomiya natin, pero lahat ba nakatamasa ng paglago na yan? Nabigyan sila ng trabaho na match ba with their ambition bilang mga Pilipino? Nakita ba nila doon sa post-EDSA period na na-empower sila? Nabigyan sila ng mas mabuting kinabukasan, o ang kinabukasan pa rin nila ay lumabas ng bansa at doon magtrabaho and then finally magre-remit sa pamilya para lift out of poverty or low income status. So ganyan yung mga tanong, and I think kailangan natin i-consider yung iba-ibang potential na sagot. And I already gave you one hypothesis, which is our growing inequality even during the reform period, the post-EDSA reform period, may have actually now come around and woken us up to this big problem na hindi natin maintindihan bakit ganun ang boto ng ating mga kababayan. Akala natin mahusay siya, akala natin maayos na yung trajectory natin, akala natin maganda na yung governance, nag-i-improve, hindi siya perfect pero nag-i-improve naman kahit papaano. Pero biglang kumambyo yung ating mga kababayan at gusto nilang ibalik dun sa dati na pangitang-pangita dun sa history at saka sa ebidensya. Napakasama nung period na yon. So yan ang kailangang malalim na usapin na sana yung mga kabataan, hindi lang dun sa mga like-minded sila makipag-usap. Makipag-usap sila dun sa nagdi-disagree sa kanila. Kasi kailangan nating ma-win yung hearts and minds noong mga kapwa natin Pilipino na yon. Yung iniisip nila, magandang bumalik dun sa nakaraan na yon, dun sa martial law years, dun sa Marcos years. Bakit ganun po yung isipan nila? At yun ang kailangan nating kausapin at maintindihan at sana ay makumbinse na hindi po, pag bumalik tayo doon, mas lalong lalala yung sitwasyon natin. Alam natin na marami pa rin tayong kailangan gawin. Alam natin na may traffic pa rin sa EDSA. Alam natin na kulang pa rin ang trabaho sa NAGA. Alam natin na pumapalpak pa rin tayo sa pandemic management. Alam natin na nasagasaan pa rin ang mga magsasaka at mangingisda natin. Marami pa rin tayong challenges. Pero kung bumalik tayo doon sa period na yun, siguradong ibabalik natin yung bad governance. So yun yung usapan sana na maumpisahan natin very soon kasi nauubusan na tayo ng oras.
Sir Bulaw?
Yes, I totally agree. Siguro dagdagan ko na lang yung sinabi ni Dean Ron. Sa experience ko naman sa mga nakausap ko at na makamarkos masyado, na susupport nito yung hypothesis na sinabi kanina ni Dean Mendoza. Kasi marami talaga ang paniwalang-paniwala sa mga nakikita nila. Most of these are just accidents, started with accidents. What do I mean? Speaking of misinformation and disinformation, halimbawa, yung isang Facebook user, browse lang siya sa kanyang Facebook, may nakita siyang interesting thing about this Marcos, sina Marcos, click niya, yung algorithm ng Facebook nagbabago na kasi yun na yung clinic niya. So for Facebook, interested to sa mga Marcos. So puro na Marcos yung kayo nakikita, not to mention, marami doon, and I have seen several of those myself. Hindi talaga totoo. As mentioned by Dr. Mendoza earlier, grabe 2 decades yung, halimbawa yan, dagdagan ko lang sinabi kasi na-mention niya na, ibig sabihin, yung iba binabatikos kasi yung post-EDSA presidents, wala naman daw nagawa, wala naman daw masyadong nagbago, buti pa daw nung panahon ng martial law, maganda yung buhay. Ikaw ba naman, iniwan ka ng ekonomiyang halos sirang-sira, parang para ka rin lang may apartment, pinaupahan mo, yung tumira doon, winasak yung buong mga kagamitan mo sa apartment. Tapos nung bumalik, ano bang magagawa mo within a week or two, di ba? Maglilinis ka lang, mag-aayos ka lang ng mga sinira yung huling gumamit ng bahay or apartment mo. So practically our presidents for the next 2 decades after EDSA, practically yun lang yung ginawa nila. Kaya kawawa actually. For me, unfair na batikusin lang yung mga presidente after EDSA na wala halos magawa. Not to mention, binabago talaga, obvious na obvious sa social media. Tapos yung tanong kasi kanina dito na about a strong leadership daw, nagmamatch din yan sa social media eh. Kasi di ba may mga image si Marcos Jr. na tigre daw siya, matapang siya. Nung hindi siya umattend nung interview ni Jessica Soho, matapang pa rin siya. Hindi siya, syempre yung mga kalaban, ang nag-trending na hashtag, Marcos Duwag. Pero ano naman yun, may narrative ulit yung kampo niya. Matapang si Marcos kasi alam niyang cheetah siya. At sa karera daw ng mga aso, ba't naman daw makikipagkarera pa yung cheetah? Alam niya namang panalo na siya. So, there's this narrative na sinaswak pa rin doon sa parang strong leader pa rin talaga siya. Kahit anong sabihin niyo sa kanya, hindi na siya matitinag kasi napakalakas niya. So, sad to say, hindi lang to be fair din with the youth, hindi lang naman youth to kasi ako may personal anecdote ako dito. May isang alumnus ng isang magandang universidad sa Naga, hindi ko na lang babanggitin ko alin sa tatlo. Paniwala din retired na siya, mga 60 plus na siya. May napanood daw kasi siya sa YouTube yata or sa Facebook na yun nga, ang ganda ng panahon ng mga Marcos, tapos kasalanan daw lahat ng mga Aquino. Palaging ganoon ang narrative. Kasalanan ng mga Aquino, kinawawa lang yung mga Marcos. So even yung mga adults na nabibiktima din ng social media. And I'm also worrying kasi babalik ako dun sa pinaka-nasalaylayan, mga magsasaka, mga mangingisda. I can only imagine, since sila malamang, hindi naman sila palaging nag-Facebook, nag-TikTok, pag sila yung nakasagap ng similar information, syempre, maapektuhan na rin yung nila, yung decision. Kaya I agree. Kawawa tayong lahat kung ang eleksyon na to ay mapagdidesisyonan lang ng majority based sa mga maling impormasyon. Buti sana kung magde-decide tayo, halimbawa yung 60% man yan or 50% ng Pilipino, kaya nila binoto yung isang tao kasi gusto talaga nila yung nanakawan sila. Fine, kung yan talaga yung gusto nila. Pero hindi, iba kasi yung information na meron sila. So parang dun sa kanilang criteria, pumapasok pa rin yung kandidatong yun kasi siya yung lumalabas na malakas na leader, siya yung babalik sa golden age daw ng Philippines. By the way, wala pang golden age ang Pilipinas. Sabi ko nga sa mga estudyante ko, if you're here right now, sorry, ulitin ko na naman para sa lahat. Sabi ko sa kanila, kung golden age na yun, parang anong ibig niyong sabihin? Kawawa na ang mga Pilipino, hindi na talaga tayo makakatamasa ng masarap na buhay. Kasi kung yung 1970s to early 80s na yung golden age, nako, for comparison na lang, may 3 diktador na namuno sa Asia, yung sa Singapore, si Lee Kuan Yew, si Park, sino nga yun, Doc Marshall, yung sa Singapore? Si Park.
South Korea, Park.
Ayan, si Park, tapos si Marcos. Tingnan nyo na lang sa ourworldindata.org para hindi bias. Siguro hindi naman mabibili ng mga dilawan yung ourworldindata.org or World Bank data. I-compare nyo yung performance natin. Halos sabay-sabay kasi naging pinuno yung 3 diktador na yan. Pero tingnan nyo, naungusan tayo. Supposedly, mas mayaman pa tayo dati dyan sa, even Taiwan, Korea and Singapore. Pero tingnan nyo, during martial law, naiwan na tayo ng Singapore and then South Korea as well. So ngayon, ang layo na ng South Korea, ina-idolize na lang natin yung mga paganyan-ganyan. Siguro sana tayo nagpapauso ng mga kanta sa kanila or tayo nagpapauso ng mga drama natin sa kanila, mga produkto natin. Sila may 2 sikat na brand ng kotse, may sikat na smartphone, among many other industries. Not to mention na halos pareho naman tayo may problema sa corruption, sa ano-ano pa mga bagay. Pero what went wrong? So yun nga sabi ko, hindi golden age yun. Siguro nagka-golden age na ang Korea and Singapore, but not the Philippines. So yun, I would agree. Malaking bagay kung bakit nangunguna yung si Marcos Jr. sa survey dahil ang dami talagang napaniwala na mga kumakalat sa social media And nandyan din, to just add, meron din kasing hate element, parang hate vote, na ginalit na ng husto ng certain powerful individuals ang mga Pilipino against yung mga namuno post-EDSA. Tapos dahil si Bongbong Marcos yung naging representative no exactly opposite nung EDSA, sa kanya ngayon na huhumaling, actually yung term, yung mga support, yung mga tao. But I'm still hopeful, sana I would also second the suggestion of Dean Mendoza. Gito rin sinasabi ko sa mga estudyante ko, hindi talaga dapat mahinto dito sa Zoom meeting natin na to or webinar na to yung usapin. Maghanap tayo dyan ng mga totoong tao, hindi mga trolls, totoong tao na alam nating na biktima lang naman din sila ng misinformation. Let's reach out. Yung mga in-unfriend siguro natin dati kasi nagbabardagulan tayo ng 2019. Sana natuto na tayo ng 2019. Walang nanalo ni isa doon sa 𝑺𝒊𝒕𝒊𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍, for example. Hindi nadadaan ang mga tao ngayon sa palakasan lang ng boses or sa degree na tinapos natin. Apparently, yung leading candidate nga ngayon, hindi naman nakapagtapos ng kahit anong degree. So, hindi yan nagmamatter sa ngayon. So, mas magmamatter sa atin sa tingin ko kasi ang mga Pilipino naman ay emotional na mga tao. Appeal din tayo sa emotion. So, let's start probably with our families, friends, medyo lang to challenging lang to, hindi siya madali. So I'll warn you in advance. Pero kung talagang may may pagmamalasakit pa tayo sa bayan natin, gagawin natin to no matter how difficult it is to face yung mga supporters halimbawa ni Marcos na alam nating naniniwala lang sa mga fake news. Unti-untiin natin silang kumbinsihin in such a way na wag tayo magkakasiraan ng relationship. Hindi naman siguro tayo sasaulian ng kandila dahil lang sa politika. Bagkus, we should win them over because we know we are on the side of the truth. And sabi nga sa Biblia, ayan mga Atenista, the truth will set us free. Diba? So, hindi tayo totoong malaya, hindi tayo totoong unified, hindi tayo totoong nagkakaisa kung base lamang sa kasinungalingan yung magiging resulta ng darating na halalan.
All right, I think we end there. We end with the challenge from Sir Bulao, to regroup, and think of what at stake, this coming May, that this if we choose the bad type of governance, this is obviously particularly disadvantageous to the poor and marginalized citizen who are especially reliant on collective action to promote their interests in the policy realm. All right, in as much as we want to address all your questions, ang gagawin na lang po namin ay yung team namin kokolektahin yung question and we'll ask our certificate to show our gratitude to our resource speaker this afternoon for their time and effort despite their very busy schedule. Yan, all right. So the certificate reads the Office of Student Affairs, Ateneo Dinaga University, in cooperation with the Philippine Association of Practitioners of Student Affairs and Services, Region 5, presents this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Ronald U. Mendoza in grateful recognition of his generosity as resource speaker in National Situationer Update held on February 18, 2022 via Zoom. Given this 18th day of February 2022 at the Ateneo Dinaga University, City of Naga, Philippines. Signed, Mr. Leo Jeremiah Arnel O. Caayaw, the Program Officer for Student Leadership Development, Mr. Rodolfo Virtus Jr., Director of Student Affairs and PAPSAS Region 5 President, Ms. Janet B. Badong Badilla, Executive Director, Office of Mission and Identity, and Father Robert Ezequiel Rivera, SJ, University President of the Ateneo Dinaga University. Maraming salamat din, Ron. The same certificate
Salamat po.
also awarded to Mr. Roland John G. Bulao. Maraming salamat din, Sir Bulao. Okay. At kamusta
Hi.
sa inyong mga anak?
Hi, always welcome. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so reminder to those who registered, e-certificates of attendance will be provided to you, and after accomplishing the evaluation link being shared now, you may opt to copy the link and then in the chat box or scan the QR code that we are now showing to you. There you go. And we hope you learned a lot from this webinar, because I did learn a lot. Kahit teacher na tayo. Let us continue to educate ourselves, no, and others in creating a better future for our country, starting this coming election and hopefully after the election po. Thank you everyone. Ingat, at sinasabi namin sa Bicol, no, Diyos mabalus po sa inyong gabos, sa inyong gabos. May request po ng team namin. I think we would like to have a group photo with our speakers. Kasi our students po would like to have a remembrance po. So may we request our participants to open their camera and then, tama ba? And then, who will cue us? Okay. Sir Vons, we'll wait for your cue po.
Okay po, so ako na lang po mag-i-instruct kung nag-take na ako ng picture. Hintayin ko lang po mag-open ng mga camera. Okay, ano lang po, konting patience lang kasi 17 slides po tayong lahat. So, yes, konting ano lang po, pag-uunawa. Siguro mag-start na po ako. Open na lang po yung mag-open. Okay. So sa first slide po muna po ako. Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. Keep smiling lang po. Keep smiling. Okay. Second slide. All right. Okay. Third slide. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, fourth slide. Fifth slide. Sixth. Seventh. 8. Dami po. 9. All right. 10. 11. 12. 13, 14, 15, and last slide po, 16. Okay, thank you very much po sa pag-smile and ng patience. Thank you very much po.
Maraming salamat sa lahat. Magandang hapon po. Salamat din Ron. Salamat Sir Roland.
Thank you very much. Ingat po kayong lahat.
Salamat. God bless.